Now guys, Walt isn't some random criminal you figure out in like 5 minutes. The guy, he literally built an empire right under the DEA's nose while having dinner with his brother-in-law Hank every other week.
Mr. White, he's the devil. You know, he is. He is smarter than you. He is luckier than you.
So if someone's going to catch him, guys, they gotta be the absolute best of the best. But before we start, let me break down the tiers here so you guys know exactly what we're working with here. First up, we have he's going to prison. This is the top tier. Only the absolute best detectives land here. These are the people who figure out that Walter White is Heisenberg, they gather evidence, and actually put him behind bars. Next we have they'd figure it out. These detectives would figure out the truth, but the problem is proving it. Walt is insanely good at covering his tracks, so even if they know the truth, they just can't get the evidence needed to lock him up. Right in the middle, we have they'd get somewhere. These detectives are on the right path. They know something weird's going on in Albuquerque, but Walt is always like, 10 steps ahead, and eventually they hit a wall that they can't break through. And then finally, at the very bottom tier, we have Walt Would Cook Them. That one's pretty self-explanatory, don't you think? Today we're ranking detectives on whether or not they could actually catch the infamous Heisenberg, aka Walter White. But we're starting with James Doakes from Dexter. Okay, if you've watched Dexter, you already know Doakes has crazy instincts, and he's been a meme twice now. This is the guy who tailed Dexter, a forensic blood splatter analyst who was literally helping the police solve murders while being a serial killer, and figured him out before anyone else.
My buddies thought I was crazy for becoming a cop. I had skills, I could have written my own ticket. And lately I thought they might have been right, but this makes it all worth it.
So let's put him in Albuquerque. Let's say he's the one working with Hank instead of Gomez. But it starts with the ride-along in the pilot episode when Walt casually corrects Hank.
Meth labs are nasty on a good day. You mix that shit wrong and you got mustard gas.
Phosphine gas.
Someone like Doakes, he doesn't just forget something like that. Then Walter asks if he can go inside and actually see the lab. On its own, it's nothing, but it's the kind of small, weird detail that sticks with someone like Doakes. So when a respirator later turns up in the desert and traces back to Walt's school, that's when things start to click. From that point on, Walt is on his radar, and Doakes isn't the kind of guy who lets something like that go.
Surprise, motherfucker.
The problem with him, though, is that he gets reckless when he's on to someone. When he suspected Dexter, he made it so obvious that Dexter knew he was being watched the whole time. Doakes loves to stare. With Walt, though, he'd probably do something similar, showing up where he shouldn't, making it clear something's off without actually having any proof. But here's where it gets interesting, though. At one point in Season 2, Jesse drives the RV straight to Walt's house. If Doakes happens to be watching that day, that's basically game over. But honestly, though, before that RV thing can happen, Walt would know he's being watched and would try to handle it the same way they handled Crazy 8. Doakes, not fully realizing what Walt is capable of, might underestimate him. So Detective Doakes, he goes into the they would get somewhere tier. He would figure it out, but it wouldn't matter, all because of his recklessness. Next, we've got L from Death Note. Now we're talking about L from Death Note, the same guy who tracked down Kira. I mean, Light, he literally had a supernatural notebook that could kill anyone whose name was written in it, a literal Shinigami, and an IQ level that rivaled almost L's own. Even with all of that, though, L still had him in his sights.
Broadcasting in the Kanto region of Japan. I had planned to broadcast this message around the world until we found you, but it looks like that won't be necessary. I now know where you are.
This L guy is pretty good.
Yes, he never got the final laugh, but the point is, he knew.
Kira is childish and he hates losing.
But how do you... Just what do you mean?
Well, I'm also childish and I hate to lose. That's how I know.
And honestly, Light might actually be a more dangerous opponent than Walter White. Supernatural abilities aside, Light was more disciplined, more paranoid, and way better at suppressing emotion. Walter is brilliant, sure, okay, but he's also arrogant and occasionally sloppy, and all of this, that's exactly where L thrives. L would immediately figure out that someone with the alias Heisenberg who can produce extremely pure meth must have a chemistry background. That alone cuts the suspect pool dramatically.
Say my name, Heisenberg. You're goddamn right.
Then from there, it only gets worse for Walter. L would come across the news of stolen lab equipment tied to the school and connect it to Walt's workplace. Add in the footage of those two clumsy guys stealing methylamine, and L would pull up Walt's entire background.
Pseudo's in short supply, so these two make do by changing up the formula.
He would see that Walt is a PhD-level chemist, now teaching chemistry at a high school in Albuquerque while undergoing cancer treatment. Dig a little deeper, and Elle finds out Walt was a former co-founder of Gray Matter Technologies, but walked away for personal reasons, selling his shares for just $5,000 before it turned into a billion-dollar company. Now, to a normal person, that's just depressing, but to Elle, it's basically a giant neon sign screaming, "Something's not right here," and a guy that smart doesn't just end up there without something going on beneath the surface. And Elle is 100% the type to start pulling that thread until the whole thing unravels. At that point, Walt's already on his radar. From there, he'd bug Walt's house, monitor his behavior, and track his financial activity until he eventually gathers something concrete.
I did it for me. I liked it. I was good at it.
The main reason he got away with so much, guys, is because Hank never considered that his own loser dork brother-in-law could be Heisenberg. Elle, he doesn't have that blind spot. So yes, this is pretty straightforward. Elle goes straight into the he's going to prison tier. Next, we have Jake Peralta, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So next up is Jake Peralta from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and to be fair, this isn't a disrespect pick. He's actually a very capable detective when you look at his track record.
I can't breathe anymore. Spent all these years trying to be the good guy, the man in the white hat. I'm not becoming like them. I am them.
Hey, what are you doing, weirdo?
If you've watched the show, guys, you already know he solves a ton of cases, reads people well, and genuinely cares about putting criminals away. Sure, the constant pop culture references might make him seem a bit unserious, but he's far from incompetent.
Backstreet Boys, I'm familiar. Okay.
But here's the thing, Jake has never gone up against someone operating at Walter White's level. He's used to handling smaller-time criminals like thieves, con artists, and low-level drug dealers scattered around New York. Walter, on the other hand, is a man who built a full-blown drug empire, outwitted the DEA for 2 years, and was literally dissolving bodies in acid. A good comparison point, however, is Doug Judy, aka the Pontiac Bandit. Jake does technically catch him multiple times, but every single time, he manages to slip away, and that says a lot.
A couple of years ago, you were getting really close, so I started telling all my associates if they ever got caught, they should describe me as
Asian dude, 5'8", spiky hair, wears diamond earrings, and has a British accent.
So then you hired a guy who matched that exact description.
No.
Now, to Jake's credit, early season Walt wasn't flawless. In seasons 1 and 2, he was sloppy, left behind evidence, and drew attention to himself. That's probably where Jake would shine the most. But the deeper it goes, the harder it gets. Walt isn't charming in the same way Doug Judy is, but he is a master manipulator. He spent 2 years manipulating and gaslighting Jesse Pinkman, keeping him loyal through psychological control, dependency, and occasional genuine care. So the idea that he's suddenly catching Heisenberg is, yeah, I don't see that one happening.
Oh, cool, go, no doubt. Man, this elevator's slow, huh?
Knowing Jake, he would probably lose the threat entirely. He'd make good progress early on, maybe even get close to someone like Jesse, but closing in on Heisenberg himself, that's a different story. So yeah, this lands him in the they'd get somewhere tier. Next, we've got Jessica Jones from Marvel. Okay, so Jane Margulis, oh wait, sorry, wrong character. Jessica Jones has something most other detectives don't, superpowers. She's got superhuman strength, can take a serious hit without going down, and can technically fly.
Can you punch through a wall? Can you stop a moving car?
A slow-moving car.
Can you fly?
It's more like jumping and then falling.
On top of that, though, she's actually a pretty solid private investigator with pretty good street instincts. But she works best when the job gets physical. Her whole career revolves around tracking people down, digging up dirt, catching cheating spouses, and then, when things go sideways, throwing someone through a wall. The problem is that Walter White doesn't really give you that opportunity. Sure, he often does leave evidence behind, but most of his operation is still invisible. That means Miss Jones isn't getting a physical confrontation or an obvious target, and would be stuck piecing things together from a distance, which isn't one of her strengths. That said though, y'all, she ain't dumb. Eventually, she'd realize something big is going on in Albuquerque. I could see her following some leads, surveilling a few suspects, and maybe even landing on a name. Maybe even her and Victor just become friends. Why not? I don't know. But then she'd probably get distracted by her own personal demons, which, no judgment, she does have a lot of. And honestly, knowing Jessica, there's a real chance she spends the first few weeks tailing Skylar for cheating before she even looks into the Heisenberg case.
Hard drinking, short fused. mess of a woman. But you are not a piece of shit.
So Jessica Jones lands in the they'd get somewhere tier, because getting from that name to a courtroom-ready case is just not her specialty. Also, since Kristen Ritter plays both Jane and Jessica, it would be pretty funny seeing her come back in the Breaking Bad universe as Jessica Jones to defeat Walt. She just has to make sure not to overdose this time. But next we have Batman. Now, we have Batman, who is just the world's greatest detective. Y'all, he's got unlimited resources, a global surveillance network, knows hundreds of martial arts, and has one of the most obsessive and disciplined minds in all of fiction. This is someone who regularly goes toe-to-toe with the Joker, Bane, Ra's al Ghul, and has even beaten Superman sometimes. Figuring out Walter White's identity wouldn't even be a challenge for him.
Show the people of Gotham their city doesn't belong to the criminals and the corrupt.
But let's humor ourselves. Here's how it would go down. Batman would detect new high-purity meth in Gotham. He'd trace it to Albuquerque within hours, and he'd be in New Mexico by the end of the day. From there, it's just a matter of time before he narrows in on Walter.
As a man, I'm flesh and blood. I can be ignored, I can be destroyed, but as a symbol, I can be incorruptible. I can be everlasting.
And that's the difference between Batman and every other detective on this list. He becomes something you just cannot outrun. Walter White lasts as long as he does because people around him keep underestimating him. And Batman just wouldn't. This guy's built different. He's got contingency plans for his contingency plans. He's got one for himself, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. Now, would Walt try to fight back? Of course he would. He's smart and won't go down without trying. He might even try some chemistry-based explosion and aim it straight at the Batmobile. But Batman would just step out of the wreckage and keep moving.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
So Batman is the first to land in our he's going to prison tier. Will Graham, Hannibal. So Will Graham from Hannibal, he don't just solve crimes, y'all. He steps inside them. He can walk through a crime scene and replay the murder from the killer's perspective, almost as if he were the murderer. That's not concerning at all.
Everyone has thought about killing someone, one way or another.
This is the same guy who identified Hannibal Lecter as the Chesapeake Ripper. They also kissed a little. A killer, though, who had been operating undetected for decades, while actively manipulating Will and literally acting as his therapist. If that doesn't establish his credentials, I don't know what will.
Don't psychoanalyze me. You won't like me when I'm psychoanalyzed.
Will.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go give a lecture on psychoanalyzing.
And if we're being real here, Hannibal is far more dangerous of a criminal than Walter White. Walt is a brilliant chemist, but outside of meth production, he honestly kind of sucks at most aspects of crime. His decisions are emotional, his ego gets in the way, and he makes mistakes Hannibal never would.
I know who I am. I'm not so sure I know who you are anymore. But I am certain one of us killed Abigail.
So how would Mr. Graham handle Mr. White? Well, he'd walk through a cook's hide in his mind and immediately feel the precision and control behind it. He'd sense a man who spent his entire life being underestimated and is finally doing something where no one can deny his brilliance. Beneath all the chemistry, he'd recognize the anger driving it.
No traceable motive, which is why you were so hard to see. You were just curious what I would do. Someone like me, someone who thinks how I think. Wind him up and watch him go. Apparently, Dr. Lecter, this is how I go.
But that's where things get complicated, though. Will knowing and Will proving are two completely different things. Like, yes, Will figured out Hannibal, but he technically never caught him since Hannibal turned himself in. And when it comes to Walter White, he doesn't leave much behind in terms of evidence, and Will's insights don't really hold up in court on their own. On top of that, Will's mental state, it's his biggest weakness. The closer he gets to dangerous criminals, the more it messes with him psychologically. And Walt is very much capable of exploiting that. We've already seen how he manipulates Jesse. Hi, Jesse. He'd likely try something similar here, pushing Will just enough to destabilize him before Graham could fully seal the case.
Is this who you really are?
I am who I've always been. Scales have just fallen from my eyes. I can see you now.
What do you see?
So Will Graham, he lands in the they'd figure it out tier. He'd figure out the whole thing, but getting Walt in handcuffs, that's a different story. Next, we've got Jim Hopper from Stranger Things. So Jim Hopper from Stranger Things is the kind of guy who's seen things that would break most people. I'm talking alternate dimensions, interdimensional creatures, government conspiracies, secret labs experimenting on kids. The man has literally been through it all.
Jim Hopper. Chief Jim Hopper.
Yeah, I've got Jim Hopper here.
He's tough, he's smart, and he has a track record of going up against things far more dangerous than a high school chemistry teacher turned a drug kingpin from Albuquerque. On paper, Walter White shouldn't be a problem for him.
This is Hawkins, okay? You wanna know the worst thing that's ever happened here in the 4 years I've been working here? Do you wanna know the worst thing? It was when an owl attacked Eleanor Gillespie's head because it thought that her hair was a nest.
But Hopper is a small-town police chief. His jurisdiction is Hawkins, and his resources are limited. Meanwhile, by season 2, Walt, he's already expanding his meth empire, has a lawyer who specializes in making problems disappear, and a money trail designed to be untraceable. Taking that down, it requires resources that Hopper just doesn't have, so without the infrastructure to build a real case, he'd hit a wall pretty quickly. And let's be honest, without Eleven and her superpowers, and without Joyce constantly pushing him about something weird going on, Hopper would probably be sitting on his ass for a while.
You were right. This whole time, you were right.
So he lands in the Walt Would Cook Him tier. Next, we've got Dale Cooper from Twin Peaks. So this one's actually interesting because D. Cooper might be one of the most unconventional detectives in TV history. For those who don't know, Cooper is an FBI agent with incredible instincts. If you've watched David Lynch's Twin Peaks, you know this man solved the Laura Palmer case using a combination of actual detective work, interviews, interpreting clues from his dreams, and even guidance from the Black Lodge, a supernatural realm where spirits communicate through riddles and reversed speech. And yeah, it worked.
I have no idea where this will lead us, but I have a definite feeling it will be a place both wonderful and strange.
That's exactly why he's such a great matchup for Walter White. Cooper, he's the kind of detective who just feels when something is off. You can't even sneak up on him for his birthday. You can easily imagine him arriving in Albuquerque and just immediately picking up on the underlying darkness of the place. And he wouldn't be wrong for it. He would probably clock Walt in the nervous energy he just cannot quite suppress. But the problem, though, is what comes after that. A lot of Cooper's best work, guys, is built on feelings, patterns, dreams, and his ability to read people in ways that don't always translate into hard evidence. Meanwhile, Walter White's entire operation is built on being extremely careful. He's meticulous about covering his tracks, and unless someone can build a solid case against him, just knowing the truth, it doesn't really change anything.
I am not in danger, Skyler. I am the danger.
What about the FBI?
I am the FBI.
So he goes into the they'd figure it out tier. Mystery Inc., Scooby-Doo. So on paper, the Scooby-Doo gang, their resume is honestly kind of impressive. They've solved dozens, hundreds, bajillions of mysteries, exposed countless villains, and have done it all without any real law enforcement backing. The problem, of course, though, is the nature of those cases. Almost every case follows the same formula. Dress up as a ghost or a monster, terrorize a location, usually a theme park or a haunted mansion or a piece of real estate someone once vacated, and hope nobody digs too deep.
Yes, might have gotten away with it, too. It wasn't for these blasted kids and their dog.
And, of course, the criminals they deal with aren't exactly as smart as Walter White. I can see the gang getting involved early. Maybe they hear about the missing chemistry equipment from a high school or stumble on the clues leading out to that RV in the desert. You could even imagine the DEA bringing them in as a fresh set of eyes. But if we're being realistic about how this plays out, things would fall apart pretty quickly. To be fair, though, Velma would probably get the closest. She pulls the local reports, missing lab supplies, unusually pure meth hitting the streets of Albuquerque. She starts connecting dots, but then loses her glasses at the worst possible moment. Shaggy and Scooby would smell something cooking and probably immediately assume it's a snack. Maybe they'll hit up that hot dog spot that everybody goes to in the show. Also, Shaggy, Scooby, and Jesse, what a trio. Then Fred, he would suggest splitting up like he always does. Daphne would somehow get captured within like 5 minutes. Meanwhile, Walt wouldn't even see them as a threat. He'd look into them just enough to confirm they're harmless, then move on. He probably wouldn't even care about the talking dog. And if the gang were to accidentally stumble upon something, they'd probably end up like Drew Sharp. Or if Walt's feeling kind that day, he might offer them a Scooby snack with a little bit of rice and mixed. That is so dark. my god. So yeah, unfortunately for Mystery Inc., they're going straight into the Walt Would Cook Them tier. They're just not built to handle someone this calculated. That said though, the ending would actually be hilarious. Imagine them pulling the mask off the villain only to find that polite, slightly awkward chemistry teacher they meet at the start of the episode staring back at them. And then, my friends, we have Sherlock Holmes. And honestly, there's almost nothing to debate here. Sherlock Holmes is the greatest detective in the history of literature, and pretty much every detective that came after exists in some way because of him. Yes, Batman is dubbed the world's greatest detective in comics, but Holmes is up there as well when it comes to observation, deduction, and reasoning.
It means when the police are out of their depth, which is always, they consult me.
Holmes would immediately notice that the meth being produced is absurdly pure, almost like it was crafted with artistic precision. That alone would eliminate like 90% of suspects.
We know from her suitcase that she was intending to stay overnight, so she must have come a decent distance, but she can't have traveled more than 2 or 3 hours because her coat still hasn't dried. So, where has there been heavy rain and strong wind within the radius of that travel time? Cardiff.
From there, he'd focus on people with a serious chemistry background. Then he'd notice the scale of the supply in the early days, small batches and consistent distribution. That suggests this isn't a big cartel operation, it's probably a small team, maybe even just 1 or 2 people. And then he looks at motive, someone under financial pressure, someone who needs a large amount of money very quickly, someone who doesn't plan to be around long enough to face consequences, or someone who simply has nothing left to lose.
Dear God, what is it like in your funny little brains? It must be so boring.
Now at this point, Holmes ends up in a room with Hank Schrader. And Hank, being Hank, starts talking about a lead they had, the stolen chemistry equipment from a local high school, the missing gas masks, and how they pinned it on the janitor, Hugo, my boy, and they closed the case. But that alone makes Sherlock Holmes pause. Holmes would never make the mistake of blaming the janitor and moving on. So when Hank casually mentions he has a brother-in-law who's a chemistry teacher, recently diagnosed with cancer, going through a rough time, Holmes, he don't need more than that. And look, again, Walt is smart, but he's not an untouchable criminal mastermind people sometimes make him out to be. A lot of the time, he survives because of plot convenience. Sherlock would catch Walt somewhere in season 1 when he's still reckless. So Sherlock Holmes goes straight into the he's going to prison tier. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Next, we have Nancy Drew. Now, Nancy has been solving mysteries since 1930, if you didn't know. She has cracked cases that completely stumped adults, police officers, and professional investigators her entire career. She's relentless, guys. She's clever, and she never gives up.
Nancy Drew Investigations.
I've got a case for you. Meet me at the cemetery at 10 p.m.
Then, in her 2007 movie, Nancy secretly investigates an old murder of movie star Delia Draycott. She finds a hidden beneficiary, she follows clues, gets kidnapped, escapes, survives a car crash, and still manages to record a confession from the killer. So yeah, she's genuinely good. The issue is that most of her mysteries fall into that classic, slightly spooky, almost Scooby-Doo-esque setup. There are clues, there's weird suspects, red herrings everywhere, and eventually you find the secret passage, and everything suddenly makes sense. But Walter White's operation is not like that. Instead of a secret passage, we have a super lab hidden under a laundry facility, a distribution network tied to a cartel, and an environment where people get killed just for asking the wrong questions. The scale of what Walt built is way beyond the kind of mysteries Nancy usually deals with. And at the same time, Nancy's extremely stubborn, guys, and in some versions of the story has even tackled bigger cases. So let's imagine how it would play out. Nancy, she's an ABQ and wants to know who's behind the high-purity meth. She'd start pulling threads the same way she did in the Draycott case, and probably she would get to Jesse first, since he's the weak link. Sorry, Jesse. And honestly, she'd get closer than people expect. But if Walt realizes she's getting too close, things could turn dangerous quickly. This is the same man who showed no reaction when Todd killed a kid. So the fact that Nancy is a teenage girl wouldn't slow him down if he believed she was a real threat. So I'm putting Nancy Drew right in the they'd get somewhere tier. And guys, let me know down in the comments below if you think we missed someone. Personally, I would have liked to see Sean Spencer from Psych, but if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, press the notification bell, and thanks for commenting, watching, and have a good one. Bye-bye!